Welcome to the module on National Commission for Minorities. The objectives of this module is to provide a basic understanding on the functions of National Commission for Minorities of Government of India and to understand various provisions of National Commissions for Minorities Act. Minorities play a major role in the development of India. The contribution of the minority communities in the progress of this country is significant even though they are small in number. The Government of India constituted the National Commission on Minorities for the welfare of the minority communities. To ensure the right of the minorities, United Nations Organization promulgated the Declaration on the Rights of the Persons belonging to the national, ethnic, religious and linguistic minorities on 18th December 1992. According to this promulgation, all countries shall protect the existence of the national, ethnic, cultural, religious and linguistic identity of minorities within their respective territories and encourage conditions for the promotion of that identity. As a country committed to the greater welfare of its citizens, the Union Government of India set up the National Commission for Minorities NCM under the National Commission for the Minorities Act of 1992. The setting up of the Minorities Commission was envisaged in the Ministry of the Home Affairs resolution, which is dated in 12/1/1978, which specifically mentioned that despite the safeguards provided in the Constitution and the laws in force, there persists among the minorities a feeling of inequality and discrimination. In order to preserve secular traditions and to promote national integration, the Government of India attaches the highest importance to the enforcement of the safeguards provided for the minorities and is of the firm view that effective institutional arrangements are urgently required for the enforcement and implementation of all the safeguards provided for the minorities in the Constitution, in the central and as well as in the state laws and in the government policies and administrative schemes enunciated from time to time. The National Commission for Minorities has been observing the 18th December as Minorities Rights Day every year. 5 religious communities, Muslims, Christians, Sikhs, Buddhists and Zoroastrians have been notified as minority communities by the Union Government initially. The Jain community has also been notified as a minority community on 27th January 2014. Following the National Commission for Minorities, states like Andhra Pradesh, Assam, Bihar, Chhattisgarh, Delhi, Jharkhand, Karnataka, Maharashtra, Madhya Pradesh, Manipur, Rajasthan, Tamil Nadu, Uttarakhand, Uttar Pradesh and West Bengal have also set up state minorities commissions in their respective states. Their offices are located in the respective state capital. The functions of these commissions inter alia are to safeguard and protect the interest of the minorities provided in the Constitution and laws enacted by the Parliament and the state legislatures. Persons belonging to the minority communities in India can approach the concerned State Minorities Commission for the redressal of their grievances. They may also send their representations to the National Commission for Minorities after exhausting all remedies available to them. Now, we are going to discuss about the constitutional rights and safeguards provided to the minorities in India. The preamble of the Constitution declares that the state to be secular, and this has special relevance to the religious minorities. Equally relevant for them is a statement of the preamble which promises that all citizens of India are to be secured liberty of thought, expression, belief, faith and worship and equality of status and of opportunity. The state is obliged to comply with the constitutional provisions for the fundamental rights stated in the part 3 of the Constitution of India. These are also judicially enforceable. There is another set of non-justiciable rights connected with socio-economic rights of the minorities stated in the part 4 of the Constitution of India. These rights are contained in the directive principles of the state policy, which are not legally binding upon the state, but are fundamental in the governance of this country, and it shall be the duty of the state to apply these principles in making laws. Part 4 of the Constitution of India, containing non-justiciable directive principles of the state policy, includes the following provisions which have significant implications for the minorities. First, the state shall endeavor to eliminate inequalities in the status, facilities and opportunities among individuals and groups of the people residing in different areas or engaged in different vocations according to the Article 38(2) of the Constitution of India. The state shall promote with special care the educational and economic interest of the weaker sections of the peoples besides the scheduled castes and scheduled tribes according to the Article 46 of Constitution of India. Part 4A of the Constitution relating to the fundamental duties as provided in the Article 51A applies in full to all citizens, including those belonging to the minority communities. Article 51A, which is of the special relevance to the minorities, stipulates as under: it shall be the duty of every Indian citizen to promote harmony and the spirit of common brotherhood among all people of India, transcending religious, linguistic and regional or sectional diversities, and to value and preserve the rich heritage of our composite culture. The minority rights provided in the Constitution, which fall in the category of separate domain, are as under: first, right of any section of the citizens to conserve its distinct language, script or culture. Second, restriction on denial of admission to any citizens to any educational institution maintained or aided by the state on grounds only of religion, race, caste, language or any of them. Right of all religious and linguistic minorities to establish and administer educational institutions of their choice. Freedom of minority managed educational institutions from discrimination in the matter of receiving aid from the state. Special provision relating to the language spoken by a section of the population of any state. Provision for facilities for instruction in mother tongue at primary stage. Provision for a special officer for linguistic minorities, and finally, Sikh communities right of wearing and carrying of kripans. Now, we are going to discuss about National Commission for Minorities. The United Nations Declaration on the Rights of the Persons belonging to the national, ethnic, religious and linguistic minorities states that the promotion and protection of the rights of the persons belonging to such minorities contributes to the political and social stability of the countries in which they live. Meeting their aspirations and ensuring their rights acknowledges the dignity and equality of all individuals and furthers participatory development. This in turn contributes to the lessening of tensions among groups and individuals. These factors are major determinants for stability and peace. All developed countries and most developing ones give appropriate emphasis to looking after the interest of minorities. Thus, in any country, the faith and confidence of the minorities is the functioning of the state in an impartial manner is an acid test of its being a just state. As the process of economic development unfold, pressures are likely to build up and intensify when there is unequal development and some groups or minorities lag behind in development process. Ideally, development process should remove or reduce economic and social obstacles to cooperation and mutual respect among all groups in the country. If development processes are misdirected, they may have the opposite effect. It is this aspect which is important and needs to be addressed so as to inspire confidence in minorities. Since independence, India has achieved significant growth and development. It has also been successful in reducing poverty rate and improving crucial human development indicators such as levels of literacy, education and health. With the enactment of the National Commission for the Minorities Act of 1992, the Minorities Commission became a statutory body and was renamed as National Commission for Minorities. The first statutory National Commission for Minorities was set up on 17th May 1993. What are the functions of National Commission for Minorities? Section 9, 1 of the National Commission for the Minorities Act of 1992 mentions the functions of the National Commission for Minorities. First, for evaluating the progress of the development of the minorities under the union and states. Second, monitoring the working of the safeguards for the minorities provided in the constitution and in laws enacted by parliament and the state legislatures. Making recommendations for the effective implementation of safeguards for the protection of the interest of the minorities by the central government and state governments. Looking into the specific complaints regarding deprivations of the rights and safeguards of minorities and following up such matters with the appropriate authorities, commissioning studies to be undertaken on the problems arising out of any discrimination against minorities and recommending measures for their removal, conducting studies, research and analysis on the issues relating to the socio-economic and educational development of minorities, suggesting appropriate measures in respect of any minority to be undertaken by the central government and the state governments, making periodical or special reports to the central government of any matter pertaining to minorities and in particular on the difficulties confronting them and any other matter which may be referred to it by the central government of India. National Commission for the Minorities Act 1992. The National Commission for Minorities Act of 1992 consists of the provision to constitute a National Commission for Minorities and to provide for matters connected therewith or incidental thereto. This Act is enacted by the Honorable Parliament of India in the 43rd year of the Republic of India. Preliminary chapter of the National Commission for Minorities Act. The preliminary chapter gives an introduction to the Act, the geographical coverage of the Act, and the information about the date from which the Act came into force. The name of the Act may be called National Commission for Minorities Act of 1992, and it extends to the whole of India except the state of Jammu and Kashmir. This Act shall come into force on such date as the central government may by notification in official gazette appoint. The preliminary chapter of this Act also explains the definition of the terms used in this Act. The first term is commission. Commission means the National Commission for the Minorities, which is constituted under section 3 of this Act. Member. According to this Act, member means a member of the commission and includes the vice chairperson of the National Commission for the Minorities. Third is minority. According to this Act, minority for the purposes of this Act means a community notified as such by the central government of India. Fourth, prescribed. The term prescribed means prescribed by rules made under this Act. Now, we are going to discuss about chapter 2 of National Commission for Minorities. The second chapter of this Act deals with the constitution and structure of the National Commission of Minorities. The following aspects are included in the chapter 2. First, constitution of the National Commission for Minorities. Second, term of office and conditions of service of the chairperson and members. Third, officers and other employees of the commission. Fourth, salaries and allowances to be paid out of grants. Fifth, vacancies etc. not to invalidate proceedings of the commission. And finally, procedure to be regulated by the commission. According to the National Commission for the Minorities Act, the central government of India shall constitute a body to be known as the National Commission for the Minorities to exercise the powers conferred on and to perform the functions assigned to it under this Act. As per the provisions of this Act, National Commission for the Minorities shall consist of a chairperson, vice chairperson and 5 members to be nominated by the central government of India from amongst the persons of eminence, ability and integrity, provided that these 5 members including the chairperson shall be from among us the minority communities. The term of office and condition of service of chairperson and members are the following. First, the term of the chairperson and every member of this commission shall hold office for a term of 3 years from the date they assume office. If the chairperson or a member wants to resign the office, she or he may do so by a written letter addressed to the government of India. According to the provisions in the second chapter of this Act, central government of India possesses the power to remove a person from the office of the chairperson or a member under the following conditions. First, he or she becomes an undischarged insolvent. He or she is convicted and sentenced to imprisonment for an offence which in the opinion of the central government involves moral turpitude, he or she becomes of unsound mind and stands so declared by a competent court, he or she refuses to act or becomes incapable of acting, he or she is absent for 3 consecutive meetings of the Commission without the permission of the Government of India, and has, in the opinion of the central government, so abused the position of the chairperson or member as to render her his continuance in office detrimental to the interest of the minorities or the public interest. However, the Act further describes that no person shall be removed under this clause until the person has been given a reasonable opportunity of being heard in the matter. If a vacancy arises due to the above mentioned reasons, it shall be filled by fresh nomination. The salaries and allowances payable to and the other terms and conditions of the service of the chairperson and members shall be decided by the Government of India. Chapter 2 of this Act also refers to the officers and other employees of the Commission. As per the provision of the Act, Government of India shall provide the Commission with a secretary and such other officers and employees as may be necessary for an efficient performance of the functions of the Commission. The Act also further clarifies the salaries and allowances payable to and the other terms and conditions of the service of the officers and other employees appointed for the purpose of the Commission. The Act also mentions the salaries and allowances to be paid out of grants, which includes the salaries and allowances payable to the chairperson and members and the administrative expenses including salaries, allowances and pensions payable to the officers and other employees. According to the provisions in the Act, the National Commission for Minorities can meet as and when necessary at such time and place as the chairperson may think fit. The Commission regularly conducts sittings in various places in its jurisdictional area. The Commission has the power to regulate its proceedings and orders, and its decisions shall be authenticated by the Secretary or any other officer of the Commission duly authorized by the Secretary on his behalf. Now, we are going to discuss about the chapter 3 of this Act, that is about the functions of the National Commission for the Minorities. In the 3rd chapter of this Act, the following functions of the National Commission for the Minorities are mentioned. The first function of the National Commission of the Minorities to evaluate the progress of the development of the minorities under the Union and states. Second, to monitor the working and effective implementation of the constitutional safeguards and in the laws enacted by the Parliament and the state legislatures for the protection of the minorities' interest. Third, to inquire into specific complaints regarding the deprivation of rights and safeguards of the minorities and to follow up such matters with the appropriate authorities, to conduct co-studies on discrimination against minorities and recommend measures for their removal, to conduct research to analyze issues relating to the socio-economic and educational development of the minorities, to suggest appropriate measures in respect to any action to be taken regarding minorities, to make periodical special reports to the central government of India on matters pertaining to the minorities, particularly the difficulties confronting them. Chapter 3 of this Act further explains the powers of the Commission. Like any other national commission or the state commission, the National Commission for the Minorities has all the powers of the civil court trying a suit. Following are the powers of the Commission: summoning and enforcing the attendance of any person from any part of India and examining him on oath. Second, requiring the discovery and protection of any document. Third, receiving evidence of affidavits. Fourth, requisitioning any public record or copy thereof from any court of office. Fifth, issuing commissions for the examination of witnesses and documents. And sixth, any other matter which may be prescribed. The chapter 4 of this commission mentions on the finance, account and audit provisions of the Act, specifically on the grants by the central government, accounts and audit, annual report and accounts report to be laid before the Honorable Parliament of India. According to the Act, the central government shall, after due appropriation made by Parliament by law in this behalf, pay to the Commission by way of grants such sums of money as the central government may think fit for being utilized for the purposes of this Act. This grant may be spent by the Commission for performing functions mentioned in the Act. The Commission shall maintain proper accounts and other relevant records and prepare an annual statement of accounts in such form as may be prescribed by the central government of India in consultation with Comptroller and Auditor General of India. The Comptroller and Auditor General and any person appointed by him in connection with the audit of the accounts of the Commission under this Act shall have the same rights and privileges and the authority in connection with such audit as the Comptroller and Auditor General usually has in connection with the audit of government accounts, and in particular shall have the right to demand the production of books, accounts, connected vouchers and other documents and papers, and to inspect any of the officers of the Commission. The annual report of the Commission is prepared for each year by giving a full account of its activities during the previous financial year. A copy of the same is provided to the Government of India. As per the provisions in the Act, the central government shall pass the annual report together with a report of action taken on the recommendations contained therein, so far as they relate to the central government, and the reasons for the non-acceptance, if any of such recommendations. The audit report is to be laid before each house of the Parliament. Chapter 4 of the National Commission of the Minorities Act deals about the miscellaneous aspects of this Act. In this Act, the chairman and the members of the Commission are deemed as public servants. This Act also provides provisions to make rules and to remove difficulties. According to the Act, if any difficulty arises in giving effect to the provisions of this Act, the central government may, by order published in the official gazette, make such provisions not inconsistent with the provisions of this Act as appears to be necessary or expedient for removing the difficulty, provided that no such order shall be made after the expiry of a period of 2 years from the date of commencement of this Act. Now, the summary of this module. In this module, the learner got a basic understanding about the activities of the National Commission of the Minorities. The module also equipped the learner to understand the provisions of the National Commissions for the Minorities Act of 1992. Learner also gained basic information about the powers, functions and the compositions of the National Commission for Minorities. Thank you for attending this module.